Good morning. I'm Kevin. I'm the discipleship pastor here at LifeBridge, and I'm really excited to get to hang out with you all this morning as we continue on in this series. I especially want to welcome everybody that's joining us from Monroe right now. We're so excited that you are joining us, and also hello to everyone else that's just tuning in online. As we continue on with week 2 of It's Just a Phase. And so to give you maybe some context of where I'm entering this subject, I am very much so in the parenting young kid stage, like smack dab in the middle. We have a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and one more on the way at the end of this month. So yes, the collective sigh. I appreciate it. So whenever I made that mistake several weeks ago, I said, hey, would you pray with me? Pray for me. I definitely meant it. Man, kids are fun. Like, don't get me, like, there's so much cuteness at this stage that I'm in right now. So many fun moments for sure. Just that childlike innocence and energy. But there's a lot of frustration too, right? I mean, some of you remember that stage. You're in it right now, or you have friends that are in it, and there's just times like you kind of give up getting anywhere on time. It's not because you don't try. Like, you do everything possible. You get up like an hour earlier. You make everything happen, and then they make that mess, or someone does that in their pants. Anyways, and it just never works out. I mean, we've been in our current house for just a couple months, and we already have drawing on our walls. That is what it is, I guess. So a couple weeks ago, my wife was out running some errands, and I was hanging out with the kids at the house, and we ate some lunch, and my 2 older kids, they ate, and they were excused from the table, and my youngest was still there. He's kind of the ornery one. I don't know why I didn't pay more attention. But I was cleaning up some dishes, doing some things in the kitchen, and hit that moment where I was like, it's quiet. Too quiet. And I heard this weird sneeze, and I was like, something, and I turn around the corner, and I'm like, Elijah, you okay, buddy? And he just kind of looks at me with wide eyes, says, ice in there? I said, buddy, did you put rice in your nose? Uh-huh. Oh, buddy, okay. So I go, get the Kleenex, get his rice boogers out, go back to the kitchen, completely underestimating how much rice he packed in his nose, because I heard that same weird sneeze again. I go back in there, he looks at me, ice, and I get my phone out, turn my flashlight on, and tip his head back. Every nook and cranny, up in there, is just filled with rice. I was actually impressed a little bit, so just spent the time blowing it out. I think we got it out. I don't know. But parenting, oh my goodness, it's just rough. And I know that's true whether you're a parent of small kids, teenagers, anywhere in between. There's just moments that are just frustrating. There's moments where you're like, how can you be so stupid? Just times where we don't understand, and the times that we just want to maybe just take a step back. And that's not true for just parents. That's true for grandparents. It's true for aunts and uncles. It's true for teachers, for bosses, for really anyone that has someone younger in their life that they have some type of influence with. And as we're continuing on with this series, Grant asked this question last week, and I want to bring this back to the forefront. Asked this question: what is the next generation worth? And we know that there's a right answer to that, but I fully admit that in my day-to-day life, the way that I answer that many times is not necessarily the right answer. But in the clarity of this moment right here, I think we can agree that the next generation is worth everything. The next generation is worth everything. At least we can say that here. And I believe that this is really at the foundation and part of the DNA here at LifeBridge. I've got to see so many leaders here, see what's going on in the up street right now across the way, what goes on Wednesday nights with our youth ministries. People that really believe that the next generation is worth everything. But when it comes to the day-to-day, how do we really value that? How do we really follow and pursue that answer? Well, what we're trying to do in this series is begin to change and shift the way that we look at kids, the way that we look maybe at the phases that they go through, not just simply, it's just a phase and hopefully they get out of it soon, but to begin to see the opportunities for every age child. And so we're talking about this definition of what a phase is. A phase is a time frame in a kid's life when you can leverage distinctive opportunities to influence a kid's future. we're going to be talking about some things that help us understand some of these different ways that we can leverage the opportunities that are there in the different phases. But I want to encourage you, if you haven't checked out the booth in the lobby, there's a booth out there that you can sign up for the intentional parenting class that Kenny was talking about earlier. You can also do that in the app. And one of the best parts of that class, it's going to be starts in a little bit over a week, is not just the content, but you're going to have the opportunity to sit around tables with other parents that have kids in similar phases. And I know there's just going to be some powerful things that just come from those discussions. But also out there at the table, there's these handouts that simply show you some of the intentional opportunities that come along with every phase that a child goes through. And I really want to encourage you to take that because phases in a kid's life, it's easy to just try to weather it, just try to get through and just simply survive. But there's an opportunity there that we want to come alive to. And so for this week and for next week, we're going to be talking about 6 things that we believe every kid and teenager needs. And so as we get started this morning, I want to give us some perspective here. So I have these jars. These are filled with bead type things. I'm not sure what they are. But in these jars, we have these bead type things. They represent a week in a child's life before they graduate from high school. So right here, I have this jar. It's full of 936 beads. I have a little thing that tells me, so that's nice. You have 936 weeks from birth to graduation. So if you have a newborn or a grandchild that's a newborn or somewhere around that, you have about 936 weeks before they graduate high school. Right here, take a major step down, jump into middle school. If you have a 7th grader, you have about 338 weeks before they graduate. Maybe you're closer to senior year. You got 52 weeks left. I just believe that this brings us some perspective as we get going this morning. It begins to show us what you could say is time, just 1 week, over time. And it reminds us of this simple principle. When you see how much time you have left, you tend to get serious about the time you have now. When we look at reality, we pull ourselves out of the moment, the frustrating moment that's right in front of us, no matter what age the kid, we realize we only have so much time left that you get an opportunity to influence in a big way. Moses actually said something similar to this when he wrote this in Psalm 90. Praying to God, he says this, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." There's something about putting a number to the actual weeks and days that you have left with a kid that allows us to start to become intentional, start to become smart, and maybe change the way that we spend our time with those kids or those teens. And so what does this mean? I mean, some of you see this and you started celebrating. You're like, hey, I'm almost there. Yay, they're going to leave. Some of you, it felt a little more emotional than that. It's kind of like, whoa, just realize how fragile this time is, how quick it goes. And so what does this mean? Do you have to make every second count? All of a sudden, maybe some of you just started feeling guilty. Like, okay, I gotta really get on the ball here. And that's not necessarily what you need to do, because you don't necessarily have to turn every moment into a teachable moment all of a sudden and have some Aesop fable for everything that happens in life. Not at all. There's actually 2 principles that I think come out of having this perspective. The first is this: every week matters. There's not a week, no matter which stage that you're in, there's not a week that goes by that doesn't matter. But here's the other thing that's true at the exact same time. You don't have to get it all done in a week. In fact, you can't get it all done in a week. We sometimes think we can. We sometimes prioritize, maybe if we have that perfect answer. If we give the kids that perfect experience, that perfect vacation, it's going to completely change everything. And it might do something. But there's something bigger going on. There's a collective value to when you put time over time. And this is the first thing that every kid and teenager needs, is time over time. Because you don't have to make every single second count when you begin to understand that this week is connected to next week, and that's connected to next week. Because whenever you choose to put time over time, invest time over time with a kid or a teenager, time over time creates history. And history in a child's life is so powerful. I did not say, hey Siri. Sorry. Have you ever considered this, how God used time? Like, why didn't, whenever Adam and Eve ate the fruit and like sin entered the world, why didn't he just, boom, send Jesus right away? Like, why is that? Because it still kind of confounds me in some ways, but, I mean, if you start to think about it, you begin to see something more beautiful going on. The fact that God didn't just, like, I kind of look to God as, like, magic trick God a lot of times. That's what I want him to be. Just, boom, take care of it. Like, it's all about just righting a wrong. But God's, like, so much bigger than that. Like, he knows there's something so much bigger going on. And Jesus didn't just show up. No. Like, he rooted it in history. Like, there's a lot of things in the Old Testament that can confuse me or that give me some tension, but, like, how cool is it that God spoke to a man named Abraham, and he gave him a promise, and he said that he was going to build this nation through him, and he gave him a son, Isaac, and one of Isaac's sons was Jacob, and through Jacob, all of a sudden, the nation of Israel came out through these 12 sons, and every one of these stories have their ups and downs, and they talk about some pretty messed up people. But it was years and years and generations upon generations upon generations later that Jesus showed up on the scene. And how cool is it that, like, Jesus didn't just show up and say, hey, I'm here. But literally his identity, his pursuit of us was rooted in history. It's as if God knew that there was something that could only be explained and only be understood over time. And I think there's so many other things that are true in our life still to this day. Some things just are complex or intricate, and they just take time to understand. And if God uses that for us, I mean, of course, some of the healthy things, some of the good things that we want to develop and cultivate in our kids are going to take time. I mean, think about this. Most kids, they're just focused on now. They're just, like, aware of what you're doing right now. So to them, you just played Legos. You know, you just shot some some basketball in the driveway. You just saw a movie. You threw balls in the house when mom wasn't home. Like, whatever it was, like, that's just something that just happened right now. But here's the cool thing. If you've been alive at least long enough, you realize that, like, yesterday is connected to today. Today is connected to tomorrow. And that as time goes on and each day and each week, things are being reinforced. That there's something powerful that happens as those different experiences mount up over time. There's a cumulative effect to what is going on. And it's hard to see that. Like we don't get to see that a lot of times. You don't really see the results. You see the time being put in, of course, but you don't get to see the results, and that's frustrating. I mean, it's like after church today, if you go out to lunch and you choose a salad over a burger and fries. That's a good choice, right? But, like, let's be honest, it's probably not going to change what you look like in the mirror tonight, right? Like, it's probably not going to change what the scale says tonight. But when you put an intentional choice like that over time, something powerful happens. And when it comes to kids and teenagers, it's hard to see the results even more because we're talking about things like character development, spiritual health, which are kind of invisible and hard to see in the first place. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth investing time. My wife had the opportunity several years ago at our last church to kind of start a mentoring relationship with a girl in our church. And this girl approached my wife, and they kind of developed this relationship, and they just kind of started meeting. And it was a cool thing. My wife was excited about that, super freaked out, like, why do you want me to mentor you? I don't know if I could do this. But she kind of threw herself into this and just trying to invest this girl like the best she could, just trying whatever that looked like exactly. And it went pretty good Like they met together, they kind of talked about life. They read through some Bible together, read through another book together, and like it was good. But like this girl she was a high schooler. She's making a lot of stupid decisions. And my wife just kind of hit this point where like, I don't know if this is like accomplishing anything at all. And in fact, like this girl actually started to have a little bit more excuses of why they couldn't meet up, and they started meeting less. And I mean, after only like 4 to 6 months, they just stopped meeting altogether. And it left my wife in kind of an interesting place because she's like, okay, I guess I failed that one. Well, I don't know. Maybe, she kind of started questioning, like maybe she's just not good at this. This isn't her skill set. But then something powerful happened. And this is the part that we don't all get to see, especially parents, but any leader that's trying to influence a kid's life. Because several years went by, and this girl went to college. Things in her life changed a little bit. Some things got more real, some things got more complex, and actually there were some pretty monumental things that happened in her life. And who did she call? She called my wife. And in that moment, my wife realized that the investment in the past wasn't an investment for right then. It was an investment for the future. And as they started meeting together again, and the relationship totally changing, my wife got to see the impact that was made when she thought she had screwed it all up by simply showing up and trying her best just to give this girl time, because now she was a safe person. And so let me just say, like, the best thing you can do is to choose to keep investing in what you can't see, to keep being present for what is not happening, and trust that God will use it. So that's the first thing that every kid or teenager needs, time. Needing our time. When we put time over time, it creates history. Here's the second thing, love. Now, I know that's kind of like duh, like every kid needs love. I think we all kind of agree about that. But like, think about that for a second. Like love, just in and of itself is kind of nothing until it's put over time. Like it's just like a secondhand emotion until you put it over time, and then something powerful happens. Jesus brings this front and center to us in Matthew 22. I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but one of the religious leaders of the day came to Jesus and asked him a question that he kind of had ulterior motives for. He kind of had his own angle, but to be honest, I'm sure if any of us got to ask this exact question to Jesus, we probably have our own angle. But he says this, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." But then he connects something in that this leader definitely wasn't ready for. He said, no, that's only part of it, though, because he says, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Like, simply put, love matters. And there's kind of this beautiful complexity to what love is, because as Jesus says in this moment, you can't love God without loving others and loving yourself. You can't love others without loving God and learning to love yourself. You can't learn to love yourself in a healthy way without loving God and loving others. Love is so vitally important. And maybe if you hear that word love, especially in a church context, and you start to feel a little opinionated, or maybe you even start to feel like trying to like put it into political lines or anything like that, I just want to encourage you, don't minimize something that Jesus maximized, especially when it comes to our kids and to our youth, because love is so vitally important. Because there's something that happens when you put love over time. When you choose to show up and love a child, not for what they do, not for their performance, not based on their behavior, you begin to give a child worth. Love over time gives worth. And here's the point to consider on that. Kids need to learn to love themselves while they're kids, right? Kids need to learn to love themselves while they're kids. If they don't have someone, an adult, that shows them how to love themselves or show that they are worth something, like what does that look like as they grow up? As the world goes from simple to complex, as things that were so black and white at some point all of a sudden begin to look so much more gray as they hit the responsibilities, the stress, and the frustrations of adulthood. And they've never known that they're worth something. They've never learned to love themselves or that they're even worth loving. And so, actually, kind of what's fascinating is the younger the recipient, the more powerful the impact when it comes to love. So, like, the way we love kids, whether kids can dramatically affect their future. Like, love's like investing. The sooner you start investing, the bigger it pays off down the road. Like, you can just Google this and you can find some different articles, some of the different research around this. So, deposit in someone's life as a child pays off bigger than deposits in an adult's life. It's still worth it in an adult's life, but the gains are so much slower. And when I say love, like, one of the best ways just to love, because I think we all probably have our different connotations, like, the best way you can prove love or show a kid that they matter is just to simply show up. Just show up. Simply decide to be physically and consistently present week after week. And remember this, like, kids will test you because they want to know, like, do you actually like hanging out around me? Do you actually like this, or are you just doing this because you're my mom, my dad, or, you show up to youth group? In fact, I would say some of the most powerful influences in kids' life are when they come to places like church and they encounter leaders that aren't their parents, that don't have to love them, and those people choose to show up time and time again. Because they probably won't believe you love them if you never like them enough to hang out with them. Love over time is so vitally important to show kids that they're worth something and to lay a foundation for them to build on, to show that they can be loved later. They can learn to love themselves in a healthy way. Here's the third thing. The third thing that every kid or teenager needs are words. Words over time. Words are important, but I think we all kind of underestimate them one way or the other. We just flippantly use them a lot, but I think we've also all probably had some experience where we realize their power. Maybe it's been with a friend, a family member, maybe it's been online with some complete stranger. But you've had something, maybe there was that piece of encouragement, you were recognized, you were given an award that was awesome. Or usually we realize their power from the other way around. The pointless argument that you can get in, that thing that was said to you that you still think about. Or maybe sometimes it's just simply this, someone makes a comment about the shirt you're wearing one time, like a negative comment, and you never wear that shirt again. Like, sometimes it happens, like, subconsciously. You just, like, it just hangs in your closet. You don't even think about it. Like, words are so powerful. And in fact, one of the early church leaders, James, he wrote the book of James in the Bible. In chapter 3 there, he talks about the power of words, and he compares them to the bridle that's put in the horse's mouth. Or he compares it to the rudder on a ship, even a big ship. And he says they're small things, but they have tremendous influence. And that's our words. And there's something so vitally important about our words over time when it comes to the next generation. Because words over time actually give direction. Now, in this one, it doesn't really take intentionality to give direction. Because the words that you're using, the words that you choose to use time and time again, sometimes just the question you ask, are reinforcing some message, whether it's a positive one or not. But when we begin to understand the power of words over time, week after week after week, we have the opportunity to tell a message, not the perfect answer in one moment, but to tell a message that's reinforced over time that shapes the direction for the next generation. Words shape who kids become and what they believe. So if you want kids to know that they matter, be intentional with your words. Make your words matter. Like, when you talk to them, but also, like, when you talk about them. Like, I'm a little convicted for me, like, sometimes just the things that I reinforce in my kids' life, just when I talk about them. And again, like, having opportunities to vent to other parents, I think is vitally important. Like, that's something just good about, like, oh, you too? Yes, okay, survival mode together. But like, here's one of the things, like as we've been kind of adjusting into life in Michigan here, we've had the opportunity just to introduce our family a lot as we've been meeting people. And sometimes I don't even realize what I'm reinforcing in my kid's life when I introduce them and I say, yeah, he's our shy one. Yeah, this is the quiet one. This is the ornery one, like I said earlier. It's okay, he's not listening. This is the troublemaker. This is the one we have the most problems with. And sometimes we say that, and while, yes, it does describe something, it does give context, sometimes we forget the things that we're reinforcing for our kids. Our words can set them up to feel significant, and to go in a positive direction, or it can unintentionally box them in, unintentionally limit them. There was a boy who grew up in a smaller town in Missouri, and I'm sure many of you could relate to his story. His biological dad was an alcoholic, and he slept around a lot, and he wasn't really interested to stick around to raise this boy. And so this boy's stepdad, who raised him, was also an alcoholic, and he also slept around, but I guess he at least stuck around to raise this boy. And this boy grew up in a home where his stepdad and his mom didn't really know how to say I love you. In fact, the words that were used were more ones of judgment, ones that he could never quite measure up to. At school, he was bullied because kids are just very creative about always finding something to bully, always something to find different about someone to make fun of. And so really he was just in a place where his life and trajectory in life was, whether he wanted to or not, more than likely just to follow the model that had been put in front of him. Except for a couple people that just leaned into his life. Because it started with his grandpa when he was younger. His grandpa, he was his grandpa, so that's special, but besides that, it wasn't really that special of a guy. There was nothing crazy different about him. He wasn't a Christian, wasn't really the church-going type at all. But when this boy hung out with his grandpa, he felt like he mattered. His grandpa talked to him in such a way that he had some type of worth. And that made this boy like to hang out with his grandpa a lot more. And that laid a foundation in the middle of everything else that was going on that told this boy that maybe I do matter. Maybe if I don't measure up, I might still be okay. And when that boy was in high school, he joined ROTC, and there was a director there that saw something in him and chose to speak that out. He chose to tell this boy, he said, hey, I think you're a leader. And then he challenged him to be a leader, not just once, but over the course of the year. Challenged him to be the leader that this man saw that he was. And again, it just built on this foundation in the middle of everything else that was going on, that maybe he was worth something. And that boy went off to college, and he met a man named B.A. Austin, which is such an awesome name. Not to be confused with B.A. Barkus, for the 5 people that get that. But B.A. Austin, and B.A. Austin did this. He shared the gospel with him, which was awesome. But he didn't just share the gospel with him. He actually invited this boy into their home. And him and his wife began to talk to this boy, and again, in such a way that he felt like he mattered. And that through that relationship, he began to become aware and realize the extreme worth that he had, not just to his grandpa, not just the potential that his ROTC director saw in him, and not just the worth that he saw from this couple, but the worth that he had in Jesus. And can I just tell you, I am so thankful for those people that chose to step into my father's life and speak something different into him, as it completely changed the trajectory of his life, one that I get to be a recipient of. And so I just want to say, when you say something this week, say it so it matters, and say it so someone knows they matter. Because the words that we use can shape the direction of the next generation. So I ask you this question: what is the next generation worth to you? What if we choose to be people that even when we think they're all idiots, even when things get frustrating, we choose to step up and step in to influence the next generation? What if we choose to be people that put time over time to create history? We choose to invest love over time to give worth, and words over time to give direction. Not perfectly. Again, as we realize that each week is important, that there's no perfect way that we can do all of this in one day or 1 week, but as we choose to show up time and time again. It's just a phase, so don't miss it. Would you pray with me? Lord, as we hold the opportunity to influence the future in our hands, as we all have people in our lives, even maybe some names that we're only thinking of right now in this moment, we're only now becoming aware of the opportunity of influence that we have. I pray that we would be people that choose to show up and choose to recognize that it's not about what we can accomplish simply in this moment, but what we can accomplish over time. Lord, and not just over time alone, but over time together. As we trust that you are working, as we trust that there are other people, especially in this room, that are working to shape and to influence the next generation. Lord, because I know that the secret is when we choose to invest in the next generation, not only is it game-changing for the next generation, but it changes us. Lord, I pray you'd help us to step up and to step in. Even show us this week what it looks like to be intentional.